of how to make every American person interact with the Federal Reserve System. So they created districts, okay? The districts are associated with the Social Security Department, and the Social Security Department within those districts goes to the main Federal Reserve branch. So if you get out your Social Security card and you look on the back, you will see a letter. Some will be A, J, H, I, J, there's different letters for it. And that's the corresponding district bank that you're a part of. So there's Illinois, there's Chicago, or there's Illinois and the Chicago Reserve Bank of Illinois, right? Which is G. And then there's the rest, the other big one, I think it's San Francisco, is where the other one is. Anyways, I don't have it right off the top of my head. But that is where your corresponding account has been created. Okay, so these accounts in these districts are what keep record of all of the individuals in America. And as long as you have an account and a number assigned to you, you're able to intercede with the Federal Reserve System. Now, the Federal Reserve System has control over commerce. Right? So, and it's also the taxing authority, or the taxing authority arm of the Federal Reserve is known as the IRS. They're kind of the ones that hit over your head. So I don't want to get too boring with this. I just want to give you kind of high level of how this is working and how they intercede, because there's some people in here that are international from Australia, the UK, and all that. So this is kind of for you as well as the Americans. So if you have an account, you can now operate in commerce. That's basically what it was. Like, hey, if you want to come to America, you want all the benefits that we have, you have to be in commerce, right? The commerce is basically the movement or circulation of energy all over the world. So you have an account within these districts. They communicate with the greater Federal Reserve system. They assign you a number and also an account correlation of what district that you're a part of. And then from there, you're able to operate in commerce. And now you utilize that number for everything. You utilize it to open up bank accounts, to do job applications, to get government benefits, for everything. And that Social Security card is everywhere. So what does the Social Security card actually extend out to you? What does it actually extend out to you? Well, it extends out two things. And this is what the whole helm of this movement is based off of, is these two things. If you have a piece of paper and a pen, write down these two things, because I'm going to bring it up not only often, but you're going to bring it up in future conversations with family members and friends. Laura's ready. She's like, okay. So the first is benefits and liabilities. Benefits and liabilities. That's the whole system of the private. That's the two things it hinges off of, is benefits and liabilities, right? If you want to receive a house, a car, a credit card, you want to put your kids through school or anything like that, those are all the benefits. So you exchange that through commerce, which is really contracts, in order for an exchange of liability to be extended that benefit. The whole rule, or the whole game of being in the private, is choosing a process out of the thousands of processes you hear on YouTube, and really try to figure out what gives me the most amount of benefits with the least amount of liabilities. Does that make sense? That's pretty simple enough to understand, right? So I'm here to point out what has the highest liability. The highest liability. The only thing that gives you the highest liability is when you do a deal with Satan. Satan is probably the worst person to look out for your best interests. Satan sits at the top of the Federal Reserve System. Well, Paul Michael, that sounds pretty conspiratorial. Now we gotta figure out where this web leads into. Where does the fake money lead? Okay, the fake money leads into foreign jurisdictions. Okay. Satan is not just in the United States, but he's all over the world. And he has a foreign bank that he instituted all over the world. And as we learned in the last video, he does it in three ways. He does it through the economy, through the bank. He does it through the military of the United States, and he does it through the Vatican to control the religion. Okay, so all Satan needs is just to make it make slavery convenient. That's his whole plan. That's pretty much it. If he can make slavery convenient for you and exchange your slavery for a privilege and a few benefits, then he's got you. And he knows that human behavior is, hey, people want things immediately. We're impatient creatures. So he set up a system where he says, okay, I know how to make it really simple. I'll give everybody a number and I'll assign everybody an entity that's their actual name, so they'll never forget it. And then they'll just sign their name, put the number on all of the contracts, and now you're held all of the liability for the house, the car, or anything that you receive a benefit from. So in order for us to really dive into how do we get into the private, not only really quickly, and remove this liability as soon as possible, so we got to stop using the social security number as soon as possible and replace it with an entity that we control but have no ownership over, because ownership means liability. So the first thing that you need to realize, or one thing that we need to discover, is it really possible to go your entire life without using the social security number any further? Well, you should do the best you possibly can. There are a lot of instances where you may have to enter in the number, especially within the Federal Reserve System, like if you're getting an EIN number. Other times, it's going to be requested of you through private corporations like vendors, banks, and credit unions, right? But the idea here is when you use it, you're not utilizing it to assign yourself liability. That's really the end game. A lot of people, we get so hooked into, oh, I can't ever write this number down again. How do I get out of it? When really it's just knowing when to write down the number when it's necessary. I had one friend of mine where I was into this movement. And also, if there's another person on the channel where he rescinded the social security number. Basically, he's like, I don't want to be a part of it. I want to rescind it and everything like that. He also rescinded the birth certificate. He also rescinded his passport. He rescinded his driver's license, and so on and so forth. That made life very difficult for him thereafterwards. And I would say that he just didn't have the correct understanding at the time. And the understanding is that this is your account. It's yours. It was assigned to you for your benefit. It's not something inherently evil. It's just a tool that's used to get you to contract. That's all it is. It's only just an account number. There's nothing inherently evil about the account itself. It's just knowing how and when to use the account. And you use the account to create your private entities. That's why the fastest way to remove liability is to create your business trust. Okay? Once you create your business trust, you utilize its EIN number or its Dun & Bradstreet number as the number in commerce from here on out. And you use the name of that entity on all the contracts in order to separate it. This is a simple enough concept. It's a simple enough concept, but it's the great debate of our movement. Unfortunately, when I go on when I view other channels, just sometimes I view what other people are doing. Unfortunately, the biggest argument is who has the best process and what's the first step in the process. A lot of you kind of gave in your opinions about what step one is. What I want to do is I want to bring us back to our foundation and basics and think about what it is that we're trying to do at a very high level. So then that guides us in the correct direction where to go forward. Okay. So when we're looking at the academy courses, when we have I Want Remedy Now, we have Operate Private. I actually have an Operate Private right after this course where we're talking about separating real estate and all of that, and talking about private membership associations. And then we have the SPC and the status correction, right? Some of you have consultations with me or ask me questions in class. Paul Michael, where is my starting point? My starting Everybody's starting point is always master class and doing the 3 steps because it's the fastest way to get you to remove liability in the biggest way. But then you might be asking yourself, well, what should I do next? Should I continue into the business credit? Should I do I Want Remedy Now? Should I do Operate Private? Should I do the SPC and the status correction? Where do I go there? You need to be able to evaluate what your highest liabilities are currently. That's my answer to you. Is you have to be able to say, what am I experiencing right now in my life that is, my pain point and that I'm liable for, and how do I remove this liability as soon as possible? And from there, as you start shedding all of this liability from ownership of your house, ownership of your car, ownership of the credit reports, ownership of student loans and stuff like that, and we shed all this liability out, then you're really free. Then you're really free because now they have nothing over you. And then that's really all it is to do in the private is it's constantly dodging these different things. Being a mother or father and you're trying to teach your kids this, it's sometimes hard to get them to care about this, in later age, especially if they're 15, 18, or 20 years old, because you have to tell them to do something that you taught them not to do their entire life. It's a different way of operating. So the best way to get your kids in your private into the private is really to start early. At the best case scenario is you have a child, you know about the truth, and you don't get a birth certificate. You don't even start that straw man. But you still record their birth in your Bible, right? And you have your own records of your child's birth. Then you write an affidavit and you say, hey, I'm going to write an affidavit that the child was born this day, this time, and I'm going to get it notarized. Then I'm going to go into, okay, now I'm going to create a private membership association. Yeah. And I'm going to say, hey, this is my family, and this is how it's set up, and this is the assets that we're protecting, and we're in contract with one another. Okay? So now you have your family PMA. Then you go into, and I'm talking from the beginning because I want you guys to see where you are in this process and then apply it where you need to, right? So you have your PMA. Now the next thing that you have to do is now you need to get some form of identification. Okay? So you have your child and you're going to be like, okay, you're here, you're born, and I need to get you a passport. Okay? Now, why is it that you want to get yourself a passport? You need some form of identification. You can do private identification, but it's good to start getting federal identification. And here's the reason why. Because you are allowing them to be you're allowing yourself to claim the identity through the Social Security Administration, or excuse me, the Secretary of State. So the communication with the Secretary of State is basically the status correction documentation, but it's edited because now it's really your affidavit. It's telling the Secretary of State that, you have a child and that you want to get them a form of identification, and then they issue that out to you. After you have the identification, you can now create as many identities as you want. This is what we call the CPN numbers, the credit profile numbers. Now, the CPNs are really just versions of EIN numbers, right? They can also be forms of different. Yeah, I mean, you could do it in many different forms, but it's pretty much EIN numbers, right? And what's interesting about CPN numbers when you're in the private is that your passport doesn't have an address on it. And because it doesn't have an address, and you go to Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, they treat you a little bit differently. They're like, this person's coming to me and they're saying, hey, I want to create a credit profile. And they're giving me numbers, they're giving me their ID, and they have a bank account. Now, bankers don't know how to deal with you either because they're like, so you're coming in, you're federal. Okay, so what's your social security number? Now, here's the thing. You would think a bank has access to the Social Security Administration, right? Because that's where all the credits like come from, right? But no, they're actually more tied to the bureaus. And the bureaus are attached to the Federal Reserve System and the IRS, but they're not very well connected. They're not very well connected. So as long as you go in with an EIN number, an address, a passport, and a phone number and an email address, you have now just created a whole private profile. Just like that. So easy, so simple. So that's if you got kid. If you're about to have a kid, there you go. There's the whole entire steps that you have to go through to make that happen. Now, what happens if you're in the middle steps? You're like, Paul Michael, I have a kid. They have a birth certificate. I've already gone through, the scenario with them. They have a social security number. What can I do? Well, you can do the same thing that you do for yourself as you do with your child. You just need control over those accounts. You need control over those birth certificates. And that's the other issue that is part of this is not only are they trying to get you to utilize the numbers, but they're not wanting you to have control over these accounts either. So this is where the SPC and the status correction comes in naturally. Okay. So now you say, well, now they have the numbers. Now I have the control of the social security number. Now I have control of the birth certificate. So Paul Michael, can I create CPNs and do what you're saying? You can, but here's the caveat to that is you're already in the system. So you can play the game, but instead of creating a new CPN, you can do one of two things. Number one, and this is the hard way to do it, just letting you know, is you can change your name, you can change your address, you could change your social security number, you could change your phone number, and you could change your email. You only have to change 3 of the 5 in order to create a whole new credit profile. And then you could separate. Okay? Or if you're just like, I got to change my social security number, I got to change my name. This is why most people who are women specifically, newly married, most women who are newly married actually have whole new credit profile numbers because your name changes, your address changes. A lot of times your phone number or your social security number changes because you have a name change and there's an update. So a lot of people go with 2 credit profiles with not even realizing it. But as soon as the bank sits down with you and says, hey, is this your profile? Is this the same profile? You could, if you say yes, and the bank links it, or the bureaus ask you, is this you the same person? You say yes, then they'll link it under one. So for me, when I go into a bank, I've had situations where I just change some of the 3. I change my phone number, I change my email, and I change my address. My name is still the same. My social security number is still the same, but I changed those other 3 things. And they ask me one question, have you had an account with us before? And I just say no. Then they go ahead, enter in all the information, and then they create an account for me. Almost 9 times out of 10, they find that other account. We found another account. Did you happen to live on such and such street? No. Is this your email? No. Well, isn't this your phone number? No. Isn't that your social security number? Uh, I don't know who that is. I was just like, I'm not going to confirm or deny because it only shows you last four digits, right? And I say, I don't know what the other digits are. Well, that is your name, right? Yeah, I mean, that's a profile that I see, but I do not accept that profile. So in essence, I just or in practice, I just created an entirely new account, right? And with that account, I can get lines of credit, I can do everything and restart over. So just doing these simple things, it's not difficult to create a new identity. It's not difficult to operate privately and change things up. It's just sometimes it's life experience. It's just like, oh shoot, some things happen by circumstance. But that's how you could create all these identities. So when I was in, and this was Wells Fargo I'm talking about. So I asked Wells Fargo, what is on that other account? What's on this other? This person owes us a lot of money. Ah, yeah, it's definitely not me. And he's like, but it has your name and it's got the same last four digits. I'm like, don't know who that is. Don't accept it. And you just start over. You just start over. Now, what happens when I sit down with Wells Fargo and they say, well, how can I help you? And I say, I want a secured card. I want a secured card. Mm-hmm. And they're like, okay, you want a secured card and you want to start building credit. And I say, yeah, I do. Why don't you give me a secured card? Here's $300, put it onto the account, and we'll extend that out to you. Now, before I went into the bank, I went and updated my three bureaus, my account information to the new email. Now, you can do it one of two ways. You don't have to do it this way, but you can't, so it's a little bit different. So you could keep the bureau's address and all your stuff of your previous profile the same. And then when you create this new profile with the bank will then start the credit with the bureaus. Now, the tricky thing is that the bureaus really do try to link everything to a social security number. However, it's still the same rules of the three. If you have any three things that are different, it creates a whole new profile. So I go into the bank and I use the bank to create the new credit profile for me, right? So now I have two identities, just like that. And it didn't take me any time at all. It just took me like 10 minutes, right? Not to create a personal account. And I made sure that my only identification that I provided was the passport. Because the passport's the only form of identification that doesn't identify an address. Does this make sense? Am I making sense? Am I going too high low? Okay, I'm just making sure. All right. So, and that's how you create as many unlimited identities as you want. That's kind of how you get, that's to me a fast restart. But now let's think of our children once again, right? So now let's go to that situation. So now you go in, you just say, what's your name? What's your address? What's your number? Now, what's interesting about if you start your child off in the private and you're utilizing EIN numbers, you can kind of, you kind of choose things that, and I've gone through this a couple times in my head. As I said, what's the best EIN number to get? And everybody, I've heard this 100 times. You gotta get the foreign EIN. And I said, yeah, I could. But I mean, I'm not limited. I'm not limited to any EIN number, right? So whatever EIN number I end up getting, I could just, reduplicate as many times. So sole proprietorship is a good one because it's all about being an individual, right? So sole proprietorship EIN, go inside of there. It's a sole prop EIN anyways. And then that's the number that's hit up to the bureaus. Now the bureaus have to examine the account now because everything is brand new, and so, and then you go inside of there, but they will eventually create the bureau account, and then there you go. Now you can start over, do it. Now, if you want to create a new identity again in the future, you got to go to a different bank. You got to talk to a different person and go through the same process again. And you have to have a different address, but and this is how you just keeping it moving down the line. You'll get an iPostal address. It'll still be a suite number and all of that. But sometimes, you can change it. Like, for example, when you look at an iPostal number, what do you see? You're on 600 First Avenue South, and then it says your suite number, and then it says your PBR number, your private mailbox number. So private mailbox number, PMB, yeah, private mailbox number, PMB. Thank you. So so you replace PMB with APT. What's APT? Yeah, that's a part action. So yeah, the PMB is then the APT, and it'll still arrive to the destination properly, and then that's where your bills will go, and then you'll have mail forwarding regardless to the residence you're actually residing at. Easy as it is, it's a little, nerve wracking. They're gonna find out. They're gonna know. They're gonna be like, "What the heck, Paul? Why do I have 3 accounts here with your name? I don't know who keeps opening up these accounts. We gotta check our cameras. Where? Well, I don't know." What, tall white guy, short blonde hair? What kind of resources does Wells Fargo have to? He keeps creating an account. And I'm just like, well, if you're that worried about it, why don't you just not do business with me? Well, we want to do business because that's how we make money is lend. So I'm not going to not take your business. Yeah. So, anyways, now where's the gray line between what this is and what bank fraud is? What's the difference between the two? So bank fraud is where you deceptively present yourself in an untrue manner with an untrue identity that is not actually you. And to utilize that identity in order to scam someone or harm someone else or have ill will and intent to scam the bank. Okay? We do not want bank fraud. So you want to be forthcoming about all of the information that you provide. And you want to be able to prove it. And you say, yep, this is it, and go from there. Some of you will run into one issue, which is a bill. A bill. You're going to be like, wait, I want a bill to show that you live at this address. Have you ever experienced that before? Like they just want proof of it? So to get over the bill situation is you write out a lease agreement and write that lease agreement with yourself. You can have it notarized or not have it notarized. It just needs to be signed. And the lease agreement is essentially between you and a company or another individual to show, hey, I am renting this apartment, this whatever, right? And then that will more than suffice the situation, so you don't have to have an electric bill or anything like that. So now you got your paperwork.